Have you ever had that really exhausting sensation, usually right at the end of a long week, that every single interaction you have in life is, quietly becoming a transaction?
Oh, absolutely. It's
Yeah.
like you can't just exist anymore.
Right. You know the feeling. You're scrolling through your messages, answering emails, maybe even texting your friends to schedule a quick coffee catch up. And somewhere in the back of your mind, there's this tiny invisible meter running.
Yeah, a meter that's constantly calculating.
Exactly. Calculating what you're giving, what you're getting, how much time this is costing you, and whether the interaction is somehow, I don't know, objectively worth it.
It really is the defining undercurrent of modern life.
Yeah.
Even if we, rarely stop to actually acknowledge it.
Yeah.
We've essentially internalized the logic of the marketplace.
Which is pretty bleak when you think about it.
It is. We've
Yeah.
applied it to our personal relationships, our free time, our very sense of self. It goes far beyond just money, too. It's the monetization of our attention.
Well, on that note, welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are exploring a set of philosophical sources we've received that propose a completely different way of living. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore a blueprint for something the text calls a sovereign commune.
Which is a fascinating concept.
It really is. And, before you picture people living out in the woods entirely cut off from reality, wearing robes and churning their own butter.
Right. It's not that kind of commune.
Yeah. Understand that this is an intentional community focused not on, violently fighting the current system, but on reclaiming human dignity by building a parallel way of being.
Yeah, the source material isn't a manual for tearing down the world. It's really an exploration of what happens when you decide to step outside of that transactional mindset.
To just opt out entirely.
Precisely.
Mhm.
To build an infrastructure rooted in trust and conscious choice instead. To truly grasp this, we kind of have to imagine modern society as a giant invisible balance sheet.
A balance sheet.
Yeah. Like every single thing you do, your time, your skills, even your basic kindness, is being commodified and logged as a credit or a debit on this massive ledger.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can figure out how this commune actually functions, we need to look at its diagnosis of our current reality.
Right, the root of the problem.
Exactly. The text starts with what it calls the awakening. It argues that modern life has undergone this quiet transformation. It didn't happen overnight with a loud crash,
The slow creep.
Yeah, slow creep where human interaction began to be viewed purely through the lens of exchange. I mean, just think about the gig economy, or that constant pressure to turn every hobby you have into a side hustle.
Oh, yeah. Like if you're good at baking, you have to sell your bread.
Right. You can't just bake for fun anymore.
The argument here is that this commodification of our time and attention carries a massive, often unseen risk. We're risking the loss of the soul's deeper purpose.
Which sounds intense. How does the text define that purpose?
Very clearly, actually. It says our purpose is to connect with one another in a wholehearted, meaningful way. And when everything is a transaction, wholeheartedness actually becomes impossible.
Because you're keeping score.
Exactly. A transaction inherently implies a withholding. You are only giving in order to get.
Wait, let me push back on that for a second, though. Isn't a degree of reciprocity just, I don't know, human nature? If I spend my whole Saturday helping a friend move a couch up 3 flights of stairs...
Which is awful, by the way.
The worst. But if I do that, I'm kind of expecting them to at least buy me a pizza at the end of it, right? That's technically a transaction, but it doesn't feel soul-crushing.
That's a really fair point. But there is a vital distinction here between natural mutual aid and the modern mental spreadsheet.
Okay, what's the difference?
Well, helping a friend and sharing a meal is about mutual survival and bonding. The transactional trap the text is warning about is when that interaction is preceded by an ROI calculation.
A return on investment.
Right. It's the difference between helping a friend simply because they need help versus evaluating whether a new acquaintance is, quote-unquote, worth the Saturday labor based on what social or professional capital they might offer you down the line.
Ah, I see. So it's like those awful modern networking events. You walk in, everyone is wearing a name tag, holding a lukewarm
And
beverage.
scanning the room.
Yes. You can practically see the mental calculus happening behind their eyes. People scan your name tag, they ask what you do, and they're mentally calculating the ROI of spending 5 minutes talking to you.
It's not a human connection. It's an audit.
Exactly. It's an audit. Instead of actually seeing you, they're looking at you and asking, what value do they bring?
Which is the exact question this philosophy demands we abandon entirely. The Sovereign Commune insists on a radical shift in inquiry. Instead of asking, what value do they bring or what are they worth, The only question we should be asking is simply, who is this person?
It forces you to look at the human being, not the resume.
Yeah.
The source text actually talks about valuing the immeasurable. It explicitly mentions things like the wisdom of an elder, the compassion of a caregiver, or just the quiet integrity of a neighbor.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this is precisely why the balance sheet fails. A traditional ledger literally cannot capture these unquantifiable things.
Right, because how do you assign a monetary value to the simple act of listening?
You can't. A spreadsheet tracks labor and output, but it cannot track the profound value of a neighbor who sits with you in silence when you are grieving.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful.
The argument here is that a person's worth exists fundamentally and completely before they ever produce, earn, or consume a single thing.
It's a complete inversion of how we've been taught to validate our own existence. But if this transactional mindset feels so alienating and so unnatural to our deeper purpose, how did society get so deeply trapped in it?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Right. And the second section of the material, which is called the unlearning, suggests we didn't necessarily choose this reality, we actually inherited it.
Yeah, the text makes a really profound observation about the nature of our beliefs here. It acknowledges that every generation inherits a worldview shaped by history and, crucially, shaped by pain.
Shaped by pain. How so?
Well, what we so often label as tradition or just common sense is often the inherited trauma of ancestors who had to learn survival through obedience.
Oh, that makes so much sense. It's like running legacy code on a brand new operating system.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, like the original software was written to prevent a total system crash on a computer from 1950. Maybe it was designed during wartime or the Industrial Revolution, when strict obedience and treating humans as cogs in a machine was a brutal survival necessity.
Exactly. You had to do it to survive.
Right. But today, we are still running that exact same code on modern hardware, and it's just eating up all our battery life and causing the system to overheat.
That analogy hits the mark perfectly. We are operating on survival patches that just no longer serve our human dignity. And this raises an important question, and it's one you listening right now should actively reflect on.
What's the question?
How much of your own worldview, how many of your daily actions are based on a chosen value versus just an echo of the past?
The text actually calls them inherited echoes, and it challenges us to examine our civic dogmas.
Right, those ingrained beliefs that define us primarily as subjects or citizens or taxpayers before we are seen as autonomous human beings.
It urges a process of unlearning all of that. But I found its approach to this unlearning, highly unusual. It explicitly states that freedom is not found in rebellion.
Yeah, that surprises a lot of people.
It surprised me. I mean, why not? If the legacy code is ruining the computer, the natural human instinct is to smash the keyboard. Why isn't protesting or rebelling the answer here?
Because rebellion is still a reaction to the system. It still lets the system dictate the terms of engagement.
Oh, I see.
If you are rebelling, your entire identity is still anchored to the thing you are fighting. The framework argues that true freedom is found in the courage to think critically, to question those inherited beliefs, and to step outside the system entirely.
So it's about building something else, not fighting the old thing.
Exactly. Critical thinking allows you to decide what values are actually yours, rather than just doing the exact opposite of what the authority figure tells you to do.
Okay, but let's be real for a second. When you start pulling on that thread, when you delete the legacy code and question all your inherited beliefs and civic dogmas, you run a massive risk.
You pull away the safety net.
Exactly. And you can easily fall into a void of meaninglessness. You realize nothing is inherently true in the way you were taught.
It can be a very disorienting experience.
Totally. And here's where it gets really interesting, because the source material tackles this head-on in a section called The Threshold, and it talks about nihilism.
Yes, nihilism.
Now, I'm struggling with this a bit. Usually when we hear the word nihilism, we picture teenagers wearing all black, staring at a wall in total despair. How do we get from that kind of bleak void to building a functioning, positive community?
It requires a very specific philosophical application of the term. The text views nihilism strictly as the collapse of objective meaning.
Meaning there's no universal truth written in the stars.
Right. It is the realization that the universe hasn't handed down a pre-written instruction manual for your life. The inherited echoes just fade into silence.
And if you are expecting someone to hand you a manual, that silence is absolutely terrifying.
Precisely. If you view that silence as a loss, You fall into the exact despair you mentioned. But this philosophy flips the concept on its head.
How does it reframe it?
It calls nihilism a sacred threshold and the beginning of the question. It is the moment all those borrowed meanings are stripped away, revealing a completely blank canvas.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. If nihilism is the collapse of the old system, the Sovereign Commune is the beginning of the answer.
So it's not about staying in the void, it's about walking through the doorway that the void creates. But how does a whole community agree on anything inside that void? I mean, if there's no objective meaning and no central authority telling everyone what to do, doesn't it just devolve into total chaos?
That is where the concept of existential responsibility comes in.
Existential responsibility.
Right. This means you stop searching for a universal purpose. You stop waiting for society or tradition to tell you what your life means, and you actively start living a purpose through your daily choices.
Action over passive belief.
Yes. It's the difference between passively inheriting a purpose and actively creating one through conscious associations with others. You agree on the rules of the community, not because a god or a king ordered it, but because you all consciously chose those rules to facilitate your shared existence.
Which brings us to the actual physical reality of all this. Because having stripped away the old dogma and having walked through the threshold of nihilism to find this existential responsibility, how does this translate into the real world?
Right. Theory into practice.
Exactly, because we aren't just floating brains in jars philosophizing. We have to eat. We have to live. How does this sovereign commune actually operate day to day?
This is covered in Part 4, The Foundation. And it begins by defining what sovereignty actually means in this specific context.
Which is?
True sovereignty is internal. It is not found in physically escaping every institution or, moving to a deserted island. True sovereignty is retaining the capacity to think, choose, and associate freely without surrendering your conscience to an outside authority.
Practically, the text says that manifest as building parallel institutions. So like voluntary cooperatives, mutual aid networks, shared resource pools.
Exactly. You build alongside the existing structures.
It makes me think of the open source software movement. Back in the day, if you didn't like the massive corporate monopolies controlling computer operating systems, you didn't waste your time suing them or trying to burn down their headquarters. You just got together with other developers and built Linux,
Yeah.
A completely parallel, free, open source ecosystem that just functions alongside the corporate one. Or it's like, instead of spending all your energy weeding the neighbor's overgrown yard, you just plant a beautiful new garden next door.
That is a highly accurate parallel. You are redirecting your energy from tearing down the old to constructing the new. You demonstrate a better way of living through creation, not conflict.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
But building that open source ecosystem or that parallel institution requires an immense amount of personal responsibility.
Why is that?
Because the framework emphasizes that this community is built entirely on relationships of consent rather than coercion. There is no state enforcement, no police.
Okay, let me stop you right there and play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
Because human nature is messy. Consent is a beautiful idea, but what happens when the literal pipes burst in this commune or the open source code gets a massive bug and nobody consents to doing the dirty work of fixing it?
Right. The tragedy of the commons.
Exactly. Or what about free riders? The people who take from the shared resource pool but never contribute. If there is no coercion, no fines, no threat of a cage, how on earth do you enforce norms?
You are identifying the central friction of this entire philosophy. Because it operates without coercion, it relies entirely on what the text calls voluntary grace.
Voluntary grace.
Yes, this means practicing self-discipline and moral independence as a literal way of life. You cannot pass a law that forces someone to be a morally independent, self-disciplined person who acts with voluntary grace. That has to come from within.
But practically speaking, what if they just don't have that internal grace? Do we just let them drain the community's resources?
Not at all. A community built on voluntary association also implies the freedom of disassociation.
Oh, interesting.
Right. Without state violence, communities regulate themselves through reputation, trust, and natural social consequences. If you consistently free ride or break trust, the community simply stops associating with you. The mutual aid dries up.
So it's basically social exile.
In a way, yes. It places a heavy demand on the individual to maintain their integrity, because your reputation is your only currency. It is a heavy burden, but it is an incredibly empowering one.
It's the ultimate test of that existential responsibility. You can't outsource your morality to the legal system anymore. You're choosing this behavior not because a law tells you to, but because it is the foundation of the community you have actively chosen to build.
Exactly.
Which leads us to the final part of this deep dive. If we have this community of internal sovereignty running on voluntary grace, building parallel institutions, what is the ultimate goal? What is the ultimate measure of success for this sovereign commune when the old transactional balance sheet is entirely removed?
The author calls this final vision a gift economy of the soul.
A gift economy of the soul.
Yes. And it states outright that the ultimate measure of this community's success is not wealth creation. It's not efficiency. It is the deep recognition that the most valuable things in life are precisely those things that fundamentally cannot be bought or sold.
So, what does this all mean? When I read the phrase gift economy of the soul, I was struck by how radical that sounds in our current culture. We aren't talking about bartering here.
No, not at all.
Because bartering is still a transaction, right? Like, I give you 3 chickens for 1 saw, that's a transaction. This text talks about a return to a soul-centered life, defined by connection without calculation.
I love that phrase.
Me too. Belonging to a group and caring for one another without ever needing a return on investment.
What's fascinating here is how the argument comes full circle. We started this discussion by examining the commodification of modern life, where every interaction is weighed on that invisible balance sheet.
Right.
And we end with a proposed system where humanity's peak experiences are strictly defined by the power of the free gift. The ultimate subversion of modern society isn't a violent protest. It's giving away your most valuable asset, your time, your care, your attention, with a 0% ROI.
Zero calculation.
Exactly. The text argues that friendship, love, art, true community, these things derive their profound meaning not from what they earn, but from what they freely give.
It's a total paradigm shift. In this space, every person is treated as an end in themselves, never an instrument of exchange.
Right.
You aren't being nice to the neighbor so they'll lend you their lawnmower or, because it builds your social capital. You're being nice to the neighbor because they are a human being worthy of kindness. The transaction just doesn't exist.
When you remove the calculation, you allow genuine humanity to surface.
To quickly recap the journey we've taken today for everyone listening, we started by recognizing the exhausting transactional trap of modern life and that invisible meter constantly running in our heads.
Yep.
We then looked at how to unlearn the inherited legacy code and civic dogmas that keep us locked in that trap. We explored how crossing the terrifying threshold of nihilism isn't about despair, but about finding the blank canvas to build our own purpose.
The beginning of the answer.
Exactly. And finally, we examined how to manifest that purpose by building parallel institutions based on voluntary grace, facing the friction of absolute personal responsibility to create a beautiful gift economy of the soul.
It is a rigorous, demanding blueprint for reclaiming agency. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day.
Please do.
Think about the last purely voluntary gift of time or attention you gave to someone or received from someone, completely devoid of any expectation of a return. A moment of true connection without calculation.
Just a free gift.
Right. Now imagine scaling that single localized interaction up. How might applying that one principle reshape the literal physical infrastructure of your own neighborhood? What would your street look like if its daily operations were built not on municipal codes and enforcement, but on voluntary grace?
Wow, what a fantastic question to carry with us. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Keep questioning those inherited echoes. Keep looking for ways to step off the invisible balance sheet, and we will catch you next time as we continue to explore the ideas that shape our world.